Bethel University Media here today. Glad you can join us. I'm Paul Condry with Doug Porter, the new women's basketball coach of the Pilots. And Doug, first of all, it's your first opportunity to go around here. And as a veteran coach, you coming into this, obviously a lot of expectations, a new system. So a wide variety of dynamics have come across your plate in the last 365 years. Number one, what was the draw to come to Bethel University?
Well, it's a strong Christian college. I like the location in South Bend here. It's a thriving community, a lot of things to do in this area, and I was drawn to the team and what they've struggled with in the past few years. You know, they had a great tradition under Jody Martinez, and I've known Jody for 20 years or so, played against him many times, and so we're very familiar with Bethel. And I felt like that this would be an opportunity to take a young team that has good quality kids on it and just help them grow together as a team and individually. And so a lot of personal aspects to that and some professionally that it just seemed like a really neat challenge.
You cut your teeth in a very competitive Chicagoland Collegiate Athletic Conference, and you had a lot of success, especially when you were doing your time at Olivet Nazarene University. Now you're coming into another league that is ultra competitive. Teams have won national championships and made it to the big dance, if you want to call it that, out in Sioux City at the Tyson Event Center. So let's just make some comparisons if you can. I know it's your first go around, and you haven't really spent the entire time through the league, but as you can look at it from an outside looking in and compare the two leagues, the Chicagoland Collegiate and the Crossroads League.
I'd say the CCAC is very strong at the top end and not nearly as strong top to bottom as the Crossroads League. This league, I think top 6, 7, 8 teams are, if not great, pretty good. And that's the challenge, is that every night's going to be a little tougher. There were some days in the CCAC where we could walk in knowing that we had a pretty good shot at it. But this league is going to be strong every night out, and that's going to be the challenge because there really are no off days.
When you look at the change, if there's going to be one significant change, it's the system. You were on one of the most unique, and as well as one of the most dynamic basketball systems in the United States of America, in this Grinnell system. So talk about the system, talk about the roots of it, and what in your mind's eye thought, this is going to be really special if we can put this in play and be successful at it.
Well, the history of the system goes back to Paul Westhead at Loyola Marymount back in the late 1980s. In fact, I was just watching a 30 for 30 interview or special on that again last night. It was put out probably 10 years ago, but it talked about the history and roots of how he developed it and how it worked. And then at Grinnell College, Coach Arsenault took over about 25, 30 years ago there in a traditionally losing program, put in the system just so his kids could have a more positive experience, not expecting that it would be something he could win with too. And he won with it immediately because of some of the tweaks he made to it. And at one point in my career at Olivet, I felt a little discouraged that we weren't developing players to the maximum of their ability and that they weren't having a really enjoyable experience. And I've always felt like college basketball ought to be a blast. It ought to be fun, as well as something that challenges you. And the system did both for us. And when we installed it in 2004, was the first season that we ran it, and had immediate success, won a conference title that first year. So it's been something that's worked for us. Now, how it's going to translate here, I don't know, because it's, every night's a dogfight, as we said a second ago. But I believe in it. I think it's good for players in their development, and I think it's good for players in terms of just the team chemistry that it develops too.
When you're looking at the big picture on how the student athlete is looking at the system coming as a potential recruit, or the current players who have not played in this system, is it as much of a culture shock as most people would think it would be? Because let's face it, I remember distinctly going down to ONU with Jody and broadcasting one of those games that you and Jody were matched up against, and I, as a sportscaster, was losing my mind. I was figuring like I was watching hockey on the hardwoods. It was really, really challenging from the sportscaster's perspective. So there's a lot to chew on that one. So just tell me your thoughts about that.
Well, it is different. The term hockey on the hardwood is exactly the term that Grinnell uses to describe what they do. He got the substitution patterns from hockey. I think Coach Arsenault, if he's not from Canada originally, certainly has a lot of familiarity with that game. It's just taking some ideas from that sport in terms of substituting, trying to keep, in hockey, fresh legs on the ice, in our case, fresh legs on the floor, playing at a speed that requires players to have regular rest intervals so that they can maintain the pace. You can't run like we do and press like we do constantly without giving them breaks. It's kind of like the difference between running a mile and running a 100-yard dash. You've got to have rest intervals, and you cannot pace yourself if you're going to make it work. So the substitution patterns are certainly the most unique aspect of it. But the three-point game, making that a central feature of the offense, is something that has always been intriguing to a lot of people. We take at least half our shots from the three-point line. It's interesting to me to see over the past 5 years how the NBA and now college basketball has taken that concept based on analytics and seen how that can be provide you with a more efficient offense. We've been doing that for 15 years, and it's nice to see it validated a little bit. But now I hope everybody doesn't start to do it, because it probably hurt us a little bit.
All right, I have to go back, and my immediate thought is I have to go back to 1980. Herb Brooks takes over the United States Olympic hockey program. He immediately tells everybody at USA Hockey that they're going to change the way they play the game. Mm-hmm. They're going to talk about how they train physically. They're going to have to make their schedule more difficult. They're going to have to do everything, throw everything else they've ever done before and throw it out the window. All right, so now here you have at Bethel University, you've got a group of student athletes who were not potentially recruited for this system. So now you're trying to ask them to change their bodies, trying to change their mindset. Talk about how that's gone through the preseason.
It's a good question. Starting point for us has been the reality that, yeah, they were not recruited for the system, but they are good three-point shooters. These are as good as shooters as I've had ever. I look at our stats in practice from the three-point line when we do shooting drills. I look at how they've done in past years from the arc and the percentages that they've been able to shoot last year and the year before. I never had kids at Olivet that could shoot like this, and we set a lot of records in terms of three-point shooting. So that's a good to see that we've got that part of it in place. In terms of the mobility, maybe the athleticism, we might be a step behind right now, and we're trying to develop that, because it's going to take some time to get them to understand that even if they're not the quickest player on the floor, effort makes up for a lot of things, and learning how to think quicker makes you a physically quicker player. So those are the biggest two areas: developing quickness, anticipation, and three-point shooting skills. We hope we've already got a leg up on.
Well, one thing about it, the cupboard's certainly not bare. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about personnel. You've got some talented players coming back in this group. Kelsey Brickner, who's certainly one to make mention of. She's got some preseason accolades by the Crossroads League. Let's talk about your elder statesmen, or women, if you will, and talk about what kind of impact they're going to make on this very, very young team.
Well, Paul, I wish we had some elder statesmen. We have no seniors. We have 2 juniors and 1 junior transfer. So we're just this far away from being a junior college team in terms of experience. A lot of younger players that are going to have to step up and play immediately. Kelsey is somebody that is multidimensional. She can play inside and score. She can step out, and she's a really good shooter from the arc. And the challenge for us is to find ways to give her looks from just about anywhere on the floor, make it unpredictable so that we can get her opportunities. Jess Irwin, outstanding shooter. We're looking at her in a slightly different role this year from what she played last year, which I won't give away any trade secrets what that is, but I'm excited about what she brings to the table. Another outstanding shooter and smart basketball player. Maggie DuBois is a really strong athlete, and we're looking at Maggie in a ball handling role a little bit, possibly a wing. We're still trying to make decisions as to where players will get the most out of their abilities. But I like Maggie's speed and athleticism. And then Maisie Heimlich is the other sophomore that we have back that was an outstanding shooter last year. I think she had 1 game last year where she made 9 threes. Mm-hmm. And every time she gets a look with any kind of space, I tell her I expect her to shoot it. And she's going to make some, she's going to miss some, but I like it when she's got the ball in her hands and an opportunity for a 3, because she's got some real abilities from that area.
One thing I've always felt that if you're going to be successful as an athlete, coach, you've got to be able to develop short-term memory, both positive and negative. If you make a bad golf shot, you got to forget about it. You got to go back out there and swing away. Same thing with shooting. And one of the ways I've always felt, when it comes to basketball, if you're going to shoot, if you're a shooter, you need it. If you're in a slump, you need to shoot through the slump. So you have to get into that scenario. So let's just talk about mentally preparing them to shoot through those slumps, as well as not get too high when you've made 8 in a row.
I'd love to make 8 in a row sometime. That'd be great. But yeah, you're exactly right, Paul. It's important that they understand that missing the shot is not a problem, because we're going to get 40% of the missed shots back as offensive rebounds. That's one of our goals over an 8-year period at Olivet. That's right at where we were. Now, that's about 10% higher than the college women's basketball average in offensive rebounding. So we tell them, first of all, don't worry about missing, because if you have a good look in rhythm, take it. If we miss it, we're going to have people crashing the boards, because that's an integral part of our offense. And we train them how to get into the lane and get second chance opportunities. So hopefully that takes a little bit of the pressure off. But the other thing is just constantly encourage them to take the open shot in practice, shots that they would have probably passed up in past styles, because they need to learn that the shot is the first option. And then if you're covered, then you can penetrate and attack. And if you have that simple concept in place, it takes the pressure off the shot, because, okay, coach said shoot it, so it's not on me, it's on him. And I'm taking that, and I'm telling them, over time, if you get the opportunities, you may miss 3 or 4 in a row, but then you may make 3 or 4 in a row. That's just how the law of averages works. So don't worry about if you go on a missed streak. It'll come back to you. Open-ended
question. The Pilots are going to have a great year if we are able to achieve these objectives or goals.
Yeah, the goals that we have 5 specific statistical goals, and this is sort of what we call our formula. It's what everything in our system works around. Number 1 is to try to take 94 shots a game. For us this year, in the first year, it'll be 90. Average is about 65 in college basketball, 60 to 65. 90 is very doable. We average 1 year at Olivet, we averaged 97. So we're taking shots quick and in transition, and teaching players how to break a defense down so they can get a good look relatively early in the possession. Second goal is to get half our shots from the arc, meaning that if we take 90 field goals attempts, then we want to get 45 3-point attempts. That's easy to make that goal. Surprisingly, it's not that hard. Sometimes we shoot too many. The third goal is getting 40% offensive rebounds, as I mentioned a minute ago. Fourthly, defensively, we're looking to force 33 turnovers. At Olivet, we averaged right around 35 defensive turnovers over an 8-year period. I don't know how this team will do, because we don't have quite the quickness that I'd like to see right now, but the anticipation skills will have to come. But that's the fourth goal, and something that makes everything else work if you can force mistakes by the opponent. And then lastly is sort of the core of the system is to get more shots than the opponent. You don't necessarily get better shots, you'd like to, but if you get more shots, significantly more shots than your opponent, then that makes up for a disparity in field goal percentage possibly. So our goal is to create 15 more opportunities, 15 more shots per game by additional offensive rebounds or by forcing more turnovers, or some combination of those two.
Final question, and really one of the most important questions that anybody will ever ask you all season long, and that's the spiritual component and development of the student athlete here at Bethel University. I know that's something that Athletic Director Tony Natale wants really puts a strong emphasis on that aspect. Not that say somebody else in the past didn't do that. That's not what I'm saying. Is Tony has really gone right to the forefront and say, listen, we have to concentrate on spiritual development. Let's just talk about that. You got a great new assistant coach, Marissa Kuhlman, who, of course, had a great college career here, and now that she's here on staff as a member of your program, give us an idea about spiritual development with your group.
Well, it starts with just an individual relationship that the players have with each other, and that I try to develop with them. Let them know that they can trust me with issues and problems and struggles that they go through. And then each day before practice, we have a time of devotion. We have one of the players lead that for just a couple of minutes, and then we'll talk about whatever comes up. Yesterday, for example, we talked about, not to give away any secrets, but we talked about the tendency we all have to be negative towards ourselves and to get down, and we talked about how grace allows us to realize that we are forgiven if we can just internalize that and accept it. There's all kinds of opportunities in a stress-filled environment like a college athletics team to learn life lessons and spiritual lessons about what God wants you to be. And we just try to take advantage of those opportunities in the moment and then in the more formal settings like team devotionals.
Doug Porter, our special guest. This Pilots will be in action here at the Gates Gymnasium for the Regional Radio Sports Network and the Bethel Sports Network. I'm Paul Condry.